Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, and more, including smaller deals that you can do without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started. John Prothro is an experienced executive with a background in M&A, operations, and multinational business leadership. He has lived and worked in both China and the United States. He holds degrees from Texas A&M and Vanderbilt University, where he was a baseball player. Currently the CEO of Foot Solutions, Inc., a foot wellness franchisor, John now lives in Milton, Georgia, with his wife and 4 children. John, welcome to the DealQuest Podcast.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, John, listen, I definitely want to get into your background in M&A and your current role operating a business where you have done some deals as well. But before we do that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing either an M&A guy or a operator of a foot wellness franchise probably wasn't it at that time, but you tell me.
No, I think the first time I started thinking about it, I think I wanted to be either a running back in the NFL or a forester. Just like, well, I like to be outside, so I'll go work with trees. I don't know what I thought. Probably just ran around outside.
I love it. I love it. When did you figure out that you weren't big enough for a linebacker? Or did that come as a
result? Well, actually, it was at an Auburn when I was a junior in high school. Auburn invited me to come out to their camp, and I'm sure they just to get as many kids as they can, make money. But they said they wanted to look at me. And I remember I was pretty fast for like a small high school kind of thing. Yeah. And I remember going out there, and there was a guy that I was rooming with. He was I want to say he was 6'5", 260 or something like that. 30 pounds heavier than me in muscle and, 4 or 5 inches taller than me. And we were all out there running, and he was keeping up with me.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? This is probably not going to be my sport.
You might need to do something else, huh?
That's right. Same with basketball. When you're a senior and you can't dunk, you might as well give it up.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. One more question looking back. What was your first deal of any type? It could be something small when you were younger or early in your career. Anything that comes to mind that was a deal?
The first deal that I can think of was selling horses. Okay. Actually, I've always liked to do random things. And a buddy of mine, I think I was probably the poorest kid at Vanderbilt or one of them. And I was out in my single cab F-150, which was pink because it was a red truck, but it was so old that it had faded. So I had a pink single cab F-150. And actually, I did this deal with the guy that sold me that truck, a friend of mine. But I was out it was an icy night one night, and one of the wealthy kids at Vanderbilt hit the back of my truck, slammed into the back of my truck, and kind of bent the bumper a little bit. And so his insurance company just came out and gave me a check. I mean, it wasn't a huge check, like $750, but sure. I thought I was rich. And so of course I didn't take it to get it repaired. I just put a jack underneath the bumper and just creaked it back up to make it look normal. And then I called my friend and said, hey, those videos that we have about how to break horses, why don't we buy a couple of horses over the summer and I'll watch these videos and break it. This is how stupid I've done some pretty stupid things. So that's probably one of them. But we did. We bought, he's like, all right, I'll come in with you. So I took my 750 and he put in 750 and we bought a couple of green horses and watched these videos about how to break them. And at the end of the summer, I just went out and visited them every day and worked with the horses every day. And at the end of the summer, we sold both of them. And we actually made good money on it. It was pretty crazy, but of course, I nearly broke my neck. At one point, I was riding one of them, and the saddle I had bought was so old that the leather had rotted, and the stirrup broke, and I fell off and it got knocked out. And my buddy drove me to the hospital, but went to the back room where there was a doctor there that he knew, because I didn't have any insurance either.
Right.
And so the guy looked at me and said, "Yeah, you got a concussion. Just, I think wake up every hour or something tonight." But anyway, it was I nearly broke my neck trying to make a few grand over a summer, but I got tossed off those horses a few times.
I love it.
But it was the first deal I ever did.
That's great. I feel like no interesting person I know hasn't had some story where we did at least one, and probably many, several younger days where we did stupid stuff that could have killed us, and thankfully we're still here. I've got some of my.
It's amazing. We have 2 girls and 2 boys, and the boys are definitely in life-threatening situations just about every single day. You just have to think, all right, well.
Right. I love it. So before you got into the business you are now, Zabra, you were an M&A intermediary. So tell us a little bit. Well, first of all, how'd you get to doing that in the first place? And then I want to get into a little bit of that experience.
So I was doing organizational development, organizational communication, post-merger integration planning for a large company. And I kind of didn't like the wait your turn sort of mentality in big corporates. So I started going to some ACG conferences and IBBA conferences, if you know those sort of intermediary groups, and introducing myself to sort of the smaller M&A advisory groups. And I met a fellow who he was kind of wanting somebody to come out and go out and do some deals for him and do all the traveling. He was getting a little older and sort of moving towards retirement, and offered to do that for him. So that's how I got involved in intermediary work. Really just deal making kind of thing.
Right. And so tell us about a little bit of that experience. What did you learn in those early days? What might have surprised you? Let's just start with that. What did you learn in the early days? What might have surprised you?
Well, from a business owner perspective, and now I'm sitting in that seat, but what was really interesting to me was how much of the decisions made were emotional.
Yeah.
Which is completely understandable. When you think about it, it is something you put your heart and soul into. And if you're selling a founder-owned business, you got to take into consideration a lot of the emotional intelligence things that you wouldn't really be thinking about if it was just sort of a private equity deal changing hands to another private equity group.
Yeah, I love that point. I've given an example on this podcast before of a situation, and actually I've had this similar situation more than once, but a particular situation where a deal that should have gone through, there was no issue on the numbers, the fit seemed right, everything was going forward, and then it got snagged up. And what I figured out was that the seller on the other side, we represent the buyer, just there was something going on for him emotionally. It's been his baby, run it for 30 years, whatever it was. I don't think he knew what he was going to do with himself after it was over, and they started to get cold feet because of that. And I said to my client, I just sensed that, and I spoke to the other attorney. Still got a feel, didn't ask it outright, but I said, listen, I said to my client, listen, I think what's going to get this deal done is offer this guy a title, chairman emeritus, and let him keep an office. And that's exactly like that got the deal done, because the guy still had someplace to go. He felt useful. He wasn't totally separated from the company. Had no duties, by the way. Had no even compensation, right? But had the title and had an office for as long as he needed it. And that really got the deal done. And that's, just a small example of the point you make. I don't know if you have any other examples.
Yeah, I can see that. No, I've noticed even people who know they're walking away and want to walk away, if they don't trust a buyer, they won't sell it to them.
Yeah.
And some of that's about employees. I get it, but also there's a huge legacy element to these founder-owned businesses. I had someone say, "Hey, you can buy the company, but you can't change the name." And I said, "Well, we're going to own it, so we might change it. I don't want to. That's not my plan." But there's a big legacy element. They built something, they want to see it carry on for generations, even after they're gone. It's something they take pride in, and I don't blame them.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long did you do the M&A intermediary stuff?
I want to say 10 years, dozen years, something like that.
Yeah. That's a long time. Any particular fun, interesting deal story, unusual deal stories that come to mind?
Well, if you'd have prepped me before the call, maybe I'd have one.
As my audience know, I purposely don't prep people not to catch anybody, but I like young prepared that come up. But numbers come up sometimes. So, and if you don't have it, it's no big deal. We can, we can move on. But anything come to mind?
Yeah, maybe revisit it at the end of the podcast, and I might have thought of something by then. But I mean, there's some real. I've had some crazy good experiences and some bad ones. I mean, I came back to the U.S. from China to open an office in Atlanta in 2012.
Okay.
And we did a couple of good deals in 2012 that paid the bills. Everybody got nice commissions and, good, the whole thing. And in 2013, it was a real struggle to get things up and going sort of at the beginning of the year. But then the back half of the year, we were crushing it. We were doing some consulting things, and we had 3 pretty large deals that were going to close in the fourth quarter of 2013, and all 3 of them collapsed last minute. It was like the worst scenario you could have. And I had told the founder of the business, the owner of the business, my deal with him was, I'll come back and open this office for you, but I want a high net profit share. I want some profit sharing. And you don't even need to pay me a salary. I will, but I want a real high net income share. And of course, I had an office and people we were paying to do the work, and I was the only one relying on deals. And so I had to call him at the end of the year and say, hey, I'm technically a W. You're actually going to have to pay me $17,000. So in 2013, I remember, I had 2 children, 2 young girls, and a mortgage, and I made $17,000.
Wow. Well, that is a number close to my heart, because in 1992, when I launched my own law firm after being at big and medium-sized New York City firm, doing big law and then medium-sized law, and I was 6 years out of school, and I was 30 years old and 31 years old, whatever it was, and I had no clients. I went from making, I was about to get a raise to make over 6 figures, which back then was big money. And my first year in my own law firm, I netted $17,000. That was my income in the first year.
There's eat what you kill, and then there's starving. And sometimes you have to be willing to do that and take those risks, but it ends up paying off typically, or a lot of times, and it's worth it. But if you want to make something, you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to be willing to actually do that.
Absolutely. I mean, I will never forget. I said, I know those numbers: 17 first year, 38 second year, 78 third year. And then by the fourth year, I was making more money than I would have at the big firm, and never looked back. Yeah. But it took 3 years, and I was paying my rent on credit cards. So, it was the classic entrepreneurial story. So, John, let's talk a little bit about what you are doing now. We'll get to the deal end of that, but just generally tell us what you're doing now on the, running a company as an operator now.
Yeah. So when I was doing intermediary work, I was always looking for co-investment opportunities and trying to do, roll my fee and that sort of thing, because I could see that's where the real money was. You could make a nice commission on selling the company, but the real win was on that sort of back end sale, especially on a good deal. And I was also making good friends with some of the longer term buy side clients. So we were working with some strategic buyers and also helping people on the sell side. So I made some good friends who are still my friends and high net worth people. And several years into doing that, actually, I was moving a lot towards consulting in a lot of ways. So we were doing a lot of consulting that was a little bit outside of the M&A realm, but still kind of within it. And one of our clients actually asked me to come and run their business for them on the day-to-day operations. So I did that for a few years. And when I left there, I kind of felt like, oh man, I'm invincible now. I've got the operation side. And I know deal making, right? So I'm going to go find something to buy. Or we were actually, so I talked to the friends that I had that had become liquid, and I'd done deals with, and we had a good trusting relationship. And they said, sure, we'll put some money together and we'll go buy a portfolio of companies. Well, then while we were doing that, while we were putting the whole fund together, I still have all the documentation. Actually, I met the owner of Foot Solutions. I think he was 79 or 80 years old when I met him. He's since passed, but he wanted to sell his business, and it's a real niche business. There's really only 2 companies that do sort of foot care at a retail level on a national basis. And his was one of them. And it was a franchise model. So, the cash dynamics were good, but it was slowing down, and he was slowing down. Yeah. And he had let a lot of things slip. And he would have told you that. I'm not criticizing him. He had let a lot of things slip because he'd sort of cash cowed the business a little bit.
Sure.
But I really liked and still love the actual economic characteristics of the business. And I love the niche part of the business because it's in a market. We sell footwear and custom orthotics. Yeah. But we do it as a service business. So they're highly trained experts in the stores. Then if you come in and you've got foot, knee, hip, lower back pain or balance issues, something like that, we can recommend the right footwear. We can design custom work. And there's a whole analysis piece of it. And we're really getting people healthy on their feet.
That's great.
And that's just something that is incredibly in demand right now. So just about everybody, when we're looking at buying it, we would tell people what we're doing. They go, "Oh, you know what? I have this thing."
Everybody's got a thing.
Yeah, everybody's got a thing. And what people don't realize is their knee and hip pain is oftentimes related to what they're doing under their feet and around their feet and lower back. So in any case, I worked out a deal with him, and I called my investors and I said, "Look, let's shift gears here. Let's buy this. Let's put our money behind it, and I'll run it. I don't want to do a portfolio. I don't want to be a private equity group. I want to run this business because it's got some legs." And then a week after we bought it, the first COVID death was announced in the U.S. So
just in case the audience missed it, right? This is this retail.
A foot wellness retailer that serves primarily boomers and up.
Yeah.
With brick and mortar.
Yeah, with brick and mortar retail.
Brick and mortar franchises. So we then, our revenue, went to basically nothing.
Yep.
And we went into it believing that we were going to make all these major changes because the business needed to be revamped. And I remember the conversation with one of my business partners. I just said, well, we either believe in this thing or we don't, and COVID's not going to last forever. So let's go do this. And so we decided we're going to do it. We ran at a loss for a long time. We just invested every dollar we had and scraped by and bootstrapped it. And I've got some real supportive investors. They put a lot of money into it as well. And we spent really from the time we bought it, we spent 3 years turning into something that we thought could support a franchise system. And so that required us to go buy some companies. We bought a pretty large company down in Florida called Happy Feet Plus. We bought some technology things. We signed some licensing deals. We got now I feel like, I don't feel like we have the people and the processes and the technology. That's the 3 pillars, right? Yep. We have those 3 things in place. And so in January of last year, we started selling franchises again. And it really...
You had halted the franchise, or COVID had halted what?
We sold one to some friends of one of the owners.
Okay.
And we even told them we're not really ready to do this just yet, and they've been doing well. And I think they're glad that he did it. But we really we said we're not ready. We don't have the scale. For one thing, you got to support people. Sure. If you don't have any scale, you can't have talent. And now we've got both. So we're proud of that.
That's great. All right. So there's so many deals you mentioned in that last segment. I want to break them down. So you got to, first of all, you raise capital. That's a deal. Second of all, you bought a business. That's a deal. Third of all, once you own this business, you have acquired other businesses. Those are deals. You mentioned licensing. So, and then obviously just franchising is a deal, right? Every time you do,
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So we're not going to cover all 6 of those, whatever number of those types of deals there are. But I'm curious about a few things. I mean, one thing you said, you had patient, great investors, right? And obviously we've had all kinds of people on, and you hear everything from that to horror stories, right? In terms of investors. So, give me just 1 or 2 sort of tips or things. I mean, do you think that's because these are folks you knew already? What are the other criteria that you vetted in terms of your investors to have such good and patient, understanding investors? which obviously is a big factor in helping you.
I mean, it helps that we're friends. It helps that we're friends and genuine friends. And people say don't do deals with your friends. It can mess friendships up, right? And that is true. You can mess some things up doing that. But you go into it with your eyes open, and I'm not really spending their milk money. Okay. I mean, in one case, it's a friend who manages a family office that's over $1 billion. So buying a small franchisor was not exactly breaking their bank. So I'd say something we've learned the hard way. When you do deals, you've got to really overestimate what you're going to need in terms of integration capital. You cannot be undercapitalized. And in the minute you realize you're undercapitalized, you need to immediately go out and get more cash.
Yeah.
Because you start trying to bootstrap it, and then other things start falling apart, and you're left holding the bag, or you have to then rebuild after you did it. So we just we had another round when our investors came in at a really nice valuation, which reflected the growth that we've gotten. But I should have done it probably a year prior.
Yeah.
Because I let other things drop while I was bootstrapping, the mistakes I was making for being undercapitalized. So honestly, I would say, take what you think you need to integrate that business. Look very closely at the software and IT and that sort of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Because for a while you might be running two different systems. Well, guess what? You're going to need more accounting admin to help if you run into two different systems, or you're going to run those people on the ground. They're going to quit. Right. And you're going to need about probably 3x the money you think to get the technology talking
just on the integration
to each other. So we're really happy. We're adopting NetSuite on the 1st. I'm 1st of February. I don't know where this is going to launch, but 1st of February. So we're making good stride and making progress every day. But whatever you think you need, go ahead and triple it, and make sure your investors are clear-eyed about that piece. You can always give it back to them, right? Yeah. But just doing the deal is not enough. You got to have enough to integrate too.
So that's a little bit on how you've funded and philosophy on raising capital. I want to go back for a second. Let's talk about on the buy side of this, buying this company. So you're looking at a company that has a level of success that not untypically, I'm not saying this always happens, but certainly it's far from a lone story to have an aging founder where things are stale or not really keeping up. And that, creates, on the buy side, obviously that creates opportunities. So when you looked at this business and you said, okay, I see the value in it, I also see the problems in it, which makes opportunity. Like, what did you think I want to contrast before you actually did it and then what you discovered when you really got in there. Like,
Are you saying those are different? You said,
let me put it this way. If they weren't different from you, you'd be the first person in history that they weren't different for. So maybe you're a unicorn. I don't know. So when you were going into the buy side, you said, okay, I've identified what's good here. Identify where there are challenges, where the opportunities. Like, what did you think the focus was going to be to bring additional value to this beforehand? And then what was the reality of what it took once you got in there? And obviously you had COVID in between, which caused the whole thing, but maybe absent the COVID issue.
Yeah. Well, the big things, I would say we were spot on. On. The brand itself was disjointed, and the franchisees had more or less just sort of started running stores how they wanted to. And so if you went into Affiliate Solutions over here, I remember one of the first meetings we had, I said, guys, we're a McDonald's franchise and not everybody serves Big Macs.
Right.
We've got to get this system up and going. I would say the biggest learning curve I had was on the technology side, because I didn't understand custom orthotic design and construction. Well, I understood how they were doing it. And they had a big lab. When we bought it, they had a big lab. There was a lot of casting and hand pouring, casting and grinding and heat molding. And there was a big production element to the business. And I'm so thankful. One of the franchisees, after we bought it, came to me and said, hey, you don't have to do it that way anymore. Matter of fact, I will introduce you to the folks over in Europe who are 3D printing these things. And they've got CAD/CAM software for design that was built specifically for custom foot orthotics. And so it was pretty shortly after that I started thinking, oh, we don't have to have this enormous, manufacturing infrastructure. Let's go and look and see what they're doing. So now about 70% of our orthotics are printed, 3D printed. And that percentage has grown. It grows really every month as people get more and more accustomed to them. It's a great product. And as a matter of fact, you can build a spaceship with it. You design it and it just happens. And there's no room for human error. After the design's done, there's no room for human error. It just prints. But and about 30% of them are still milled.
Sure.
But we don't have to have the enormous sort of manufacturing infrastructure that they have.
And now that the 3D printer, have you also decentralized that, or do you still do that centrally?
Yeah. That was the other thing. The lab really didn't make money. And we're actually put 3D printers now on the floor of flagship stores. So we're doing it regionally right now and feeding as a hub.
Interesting. Any other differences come to mind on what you thought you'd focus on, or the issues were and what turned up?
Yes, but I would be throwing people under the bus. I don't know.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, and but listen, that's a real, I mean, even without the specifics, that's a real point, in deals, is that, not everything you're told and not every person you thought was going to perform or whatever, turns out. And, listen, it's one of those things where, one of my favorite expressions that I say to folks, including my team, is, hey, if it were easy, everyone would do it. So,
yeah, it's funny about that. My wife is an incredible, charming woman, and I wasn't used to getting sued. Okay. And we got sued for something, an ambulance chaser type lawyer kind of thing, suing us for, I don't know how much I can say, but because it was settled out, but so ticked off about it. Of course, I've been involved in lawsuits before. You can't be in business without being involved in lawsuits. But I was so mad about it. And she said, look, if you want to be a big businessman and you want to make yourself out to be a tycoon, you better get ready, and stop worrying about it, because you're going to get sued. There's going to be people who have problems with you. And that's just the way the world works. And she said, you can decide you want to go do a regular 9 to 5 and work for the man and let him worry about it.
Right.
And I thought, that's good advice. I guess it's sort of a good sign if you're getting sued, right?
Yeah. It's, in neuro-linguistic programming technology, they say that's called a reframing, so the reframe is, oh my God, I'm being sued. The reframe could be, wow, somebody, like, I'm important enough, I'm successful enough for somebody to sue me. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. The first time you get sued for money you don't even have, you're like, okay, great. They must think I'm more successful than I am, right?
Exactly. Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business, Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to CoreyCupford.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back to the show. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about two other aspects of a little more on the franchising, and then maybe a little bit on licensing. So on the franchising, so what is it? I mean, we've had some folks on who've been in the franchise world, but in fact, one person we had on recently who puts together franchise deals and things like that. But as a franchisor, as operating a franchisor, that's an interesting business model, right? I mean, if it's done right, it can be really lucrative and very successful. But at the same time, there are all kinds of pitfalls that range from how do you build the systems and keep franchise in line, picking the right people to be successful, regulatory issues, that kind of stuff. So what does it take to build a successful franchise model, or to rebuild or revamp one that you've bought that had, some level of success, but obviously had problems?
Yeah, I don't think it's any different than basic blocking and tackling in business. I think you got to think about differentiation.
Yep.
Because the world's full of limited resources, and someone's got to come to you rather than something else. So if there's an opportunity cost, you want to be the opportunity that people want. And that goes from the customer all the way to the franchisee. I think we've done a successful job. And when we opened franchising back up, I think we did a real good job of selling franchises by being very transparent and having a lot of people walk when you say, look, this is an annuity investment. tell everybody this. I could do it in my sleep. So an annuity investment, you're probably going to lose money in your first year. You might break even, but you're probably going to lose money in your first year. But every single customer that walks through the door in years 1, 2, and part of 3 are probably going to be people you had to earn. Now, let me tell you, when somebody comes to Foot Solutions, they keep coming back. They will come to you until the day they die, and then they'll bring their daughter or son with them too, and then that person will. So the lifetime value of a customer is huge because we do a great job all the way up from when we're selling a franchise. We're very sincere and honest with the people who are buying them, and then that bleeds over into the people who want to be franchisees. Their staff, they're taught to do that with the customer, right? And so it's a real high customer service, high touch business that keeps people coming back, but it takes a little while to get there. And so we tell people, like, don't expect this to be a home run right off the bat. You're going to get, but if you get to a point where the store is mature, and we've been selling mostly to investor folks, multi-unit investors. If you get to a point where the store is mature, now you've got something that's just going to last you. It's just going to last you, and it's just going to keep kicking off cash. But you're just going to see the same folks come back, and they're going to tell people, and word of mouth is going to be huge, but you got to do it right. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
that you are.
The way I've found to be successful in the franchising space is just to be like, just differentiate yourself by being honest about what's going on.
Yeah. So you said you're selling mainly to investor groups. So is it, are you selling territories or geography wise, which is generally what's done? And so that's
yeah. So we'll sell multi-unit territories. Typically, somebody will say, "Hey, I want to buy a city," and we'll say, "All right, well, let's look and see reasonably how many spaces there are within that city."
Yeah,
and we sell them multi-units.
And is it a model where they're master franchisors and then they have sub folks, or where they just own multiple locations and then hire people and run them?
No, they just own multiple locations.
Yeah. Okay, great.
We do have some master type of relationships. The fellow in Ireland, he has 8 stores in Ireland and 2 in the UK, and he's a master. The fellow in Canada has, I think, 4 or 5, and it's going to be growing that pretty aggressively.
Right. So international. Okay. So is there anything else? I mean, for me, I'm not a franchise lawyer. I know some folks who do that or prefer that work out when I get the legal work, but I have reviewed, especially on the franchisor side, because putting together those models and legal, I have reviewed stuff from the franchisee side. And usually the details are all around, obviously, what percentage of revenue, whatever you're paying, the franchise fees, but then also with like what kind of support. And this is the big thing, right? Where franchises go wrong, right? It's what kind of support are you getting from your franchisor? Are they capitalized well enough to do that? Do you have some sort of guaranteed advertising spend? Things like that, right? So I'm assuming those are some of the things that you have been working on to get that. You mentioned getting the team in place and having the right infrastructure before you started reselling, franchises again. I'm assuming those are some of the things you're working on, right?
Yeah. So if you're considering investing in a franchise, those are all important questions to ask and try to get a feel for what really is behind the salesperson. And a lot of them are using FSOs, franchise sales organizations, to sell their franchises. We don't do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but we don't do that. Yeah. But you really need to make sure you talk to the business and see the org chart, really. I mean, that's what I'd be asking for. Give me the org chart. Is that person a contractor, part-time, or is that person a full-time employee? Yeah. And then get a sense for what you got. Because I think you have a lot of early franchises, and I don't blame them, but you got sort of one head and then 3 or 4 people that are on the website, they're just contractors that maybe add a little bit of value here and there. But is there a real group of people there behind the franchise able to support you? And if there's not, maybe it's still worth it. But at least you're going into it with your eyes open.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, listen, it's like anything else. It's a more early stage, more speculative investment, right? Will the franchise system work out? It's like buying into early stage companies or buying that first house in that development. I was actually just on the phone this morning with a entrepreneurs organization attorney colleague of mine who I reached out to because we may do something in Mexico. And one of the things we're talking about is the fact that, well, it's great. You get great prices when you get in early in these development communities, but if the developer runs out of money and they never build the common areas and the pool and the tennis court and the big rec center and the whatever that they promised, problem. So it's the same conversation everywhere. The last kind of deal I want to touch on, because you've done so many before we go to my final two questions, you mentioned licensing. And some people even confuse licensing and franchising. They're totally different things, not only from a legal point of view, a regulatory point of view, but where do you get involved in licensing deals?
On the product side, typically the product side. So we carry a product, we license a product from Italy that's a high frequency shock absorption technology, which is pretty cool. It was actually on Shark Tank.
Okay.
And if you hit everybody, we always say, hit a metal pole with a bat, the sting that's going through your hands, that's high frequency shock. Yeah. And when you walk and run and jump and all that stuff, you play in sports. A lot of tennis players buy this product from us. It's called Noene, Noene. But it prevents a lot of aches. Let's just put it that way. It reduces that shock that goes back there. But we license that product. We have an exclusive license on a massaging sandal. It's a Japanese invented product now owned by a company in Dubai, or at least partially owned by a company in Dubai, but really helpful for circulation. And so it's super unique. And of course, we're a way to distribute kind of super unique foot health products, right? So it's a win-win. We have a license with the technology provider that we use, the CAD/CAM software and 3D printing company. So yeah, it's those kind of deals are always win-wins, or at least the ones we put together. They're, it's harder to do it with a bigger, more established company. They're going to want more out of you, of course. But if you can keep your ear to the ground and find things that are unique and good, you can get in early with them and everybody wins.
Yeah, love that. One of the things before I come to my final two questions that I want to point out to the listeners is one of the things I talk about all the time on this podcast is the mindset of a deal maker. And even the fundamental premise of the podcast, like one of the reasons I really launched this is because I believe that deal-driven growth is an underutilized tool. It's not for everybody, but it's an underutilized tool. So many entrepreneurs are banging their heads against the wall or even if they're somewhat successful in growing their business organically, right? Getting more customers, getting more clients, getting new sales and marketing, providing great products and services. Obviously, that's got to be at the core of any business. And if you don't do that well, you're not going to, most of the time, you're not going to do deals to get your way out of it. But there is this additional way to grow through deal-driven growth. And so many companies don't take advantage of any of it. And some folks only think, when they think of deals, they only think about capital raising and M&A, which are two of the types of deals you have done. But then on top of it, we talked about franchising, we talked about licensing, right? There are other types of deals that people can do. So you are just such a great example for the listeners, for the whole reason I do this podcast, to try to get entrepreneurs thinking like, wait, if I've got in fact, there's a talk I'm going to be doing in Singapore at the Entrepreneurs Organization Global Leadership Conference and it's basically, I'm going to do a talk, but then I'm going to basically do hot seats with entrepreneurs that are going to say, all right, what is your biggest problem, frustration, issue? Okay. And then let's brainstorm about deals that can help you do that. Right. And there's so many examples, whether it's getting into a new market, whether it's, our industry, geography, whatever. Yes, there are times when it makes sense to try to do that organically, to try to hire people in that new geography or put your salespeople into that new market. But there are times when a joint venture strategic alliance might be a better, way to do it. You could theoretically have tried to develop those things that you licensed, right?
Right.
But in your case, obviously was the better decision. You decided to license it from somebody else. So, I just want to sort of bring it home here, because you've done so many kind of deals that it's clear that you have this mentality that, hey, yes, we are going to grow organically and all that kind of stuff, but we also are going to look at deal opportunities. And obviously you've got to the point, despite COVID and all the challenges, to have this thing be very successful, I think, in part because deals have been part of the strategy.
Yeah, and you can break a lot of things doing deals too. I mean, you can drop the ball and you can cause all sorts of disruption and complexity. And we had a dinner last night with our corporate team, and I had to basically just told these guys, look, I'm sorry you're working so hard. I just can't help it. I can't help it. Every time they turn around, I'm asking them to help me put another deal together, to make it work. But you're totally right. You're totally right. I think the mentality really has to be open palm, because you have to be willing to give up some things. If you're going to do deals, You got to be willing to let other people win while you win. But you got to be able to open your books up to folks too. Like most deals are going to come with some minimum purchase requirements. You got to be able to tell them, I had a bad quarter. I didn't sell enough of your product, and damn, let's work this out. that kind of. But it's a much more collaborative type of approach, and I really do like it. I'm not against putting my business. I mean, well, I don't want to say too much, but I don't care about being a big thing all by myself. I'd rather be a real small part of a huge thing. Because it's just not my mentality. I just want to see. It's just fun to see the thing grow. It's just fun to watch. It's fun to watch it and be a part of something that gets bigger and changes and adapts. And I'm probably the most boring person in the world when it comes to adaptability and changing and technology. I like to bird watch. Like but in business, I like the technology side, and I love seeing what other people are doing and collaborating with them. It's just fun. It's fun.
Love it. So John, if people want to find out more about your company and everything that's going on, what's the best place for them to go?
footsolutions.com. You can find me on LinkedIn too if you want. But if you're a software salesperson, I always say this, don't reach out to me. I'm not interested. Speaking of which, if there's an entrepreneur out there that you're into coding, please create a LinkedIn where you're kicked out if you try to sell somebody something.
There we go. I will join. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I get all of us. I get.
But footsolutions.com, and if you're interested in franchising, you always go down to the very bottom. We sort of bury it because we only want serious people reaching out to us to click on the franchising link at the bottom. But reach out to me on LinkedIn, and hopefully I'll see it in between all the software sales messages.
I love it. Great. John, my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And to me, that means everything from freedom from all people from oppression around the world to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and I haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Well, I tell you, if you're into freedom, you should support the International Justice Mission. It's about $100 million organization, I think even more, based out of DC, that saves people from sex trafficking and slavery around the world. And they have offices. They go to really dangerous places and set up offices and partner with local law enforcement to save people and then rehabilitate them. So look into ijam.org, I would say, if you're into freedom. But I don't even remember what the question was. Like, how do I value freedom? Or
yeah, I mean, what does freedom mean to you in your life and business?
Man, I tell you, it's as long as you're working with people that you really enjoy working with, I don't mind managing up. I like it when my board comes to town and they challenge me on something. I like it because I like them and I trust and admire them. But I would say freedom to me is being able to work with people you enjoy, and having time to spend with your family. God's blessed us with such a tremendous good family. I love being home, and the more time I can be home, I want to do it. So at some point, if I ever slow down a little bit, it's going to be nice to spend more time with them.
Love it. Love it. John Prothro, thank you for being such a great guest on the DealQuest Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. The Deal Den is a place where entrepreneurs, high-level executives, and business leaders come together, support each other's growth and success, and share what's working best, as well as what challenges we are facing right now. You will get input not only from me, but from all of our members. We collaborate and serve each other. To join us, go to corykupfer.com/DealDen. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.